Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the heart of a forgotten land, where mountains pierced the heavens and ancient trees whispered the secrets of ages long past, the Dragon Soul ruins lay dormant. For centuries, travelers and adventurers alike had spoken of its forbidden power, the last remnant of a mighty, long-extinct dragon race, whose legacy was shrouded in both wonder and terror. Few dared to seek it out. Fewer still returned. But for Kale, the ruins were not a place of fear. They were a place of destiny. Kale stood at the edge of the rocky precipice, the wind biting at his cloak as he gazed down at the crumbling stone structures beneath him. The once magnificent pillars, now weathered by time, jutted from the earth like the bones of a forgotten giant. Beneath them, the whispers of the ancient dragon souls echoed in the hollow chambers, a call only the truly ambitious could hear. And Kale had heard it loud and clear. For years, he had prepared for this moment, studying the arcane tomes of forgotten ages, mastering the arts that no other dared. He believed that the world was broken, ruled by greed, plagued by war, and filled with chaos. Only one with true power could bring it to order, and that one would be him. The dragon soul, said to contain unimaginable power, would grant him what he needed to reshape the world in his image. The notion of balance, of restraint, was nothing but a fool's creed. With the dragon's power, Kale could unite the world, even if it meant doing so by force. That he took a deep breath and began his descent into the ruins. Far to the east, in a quiet village nestled among rolling hills, a warrior named Terran sharpened his sword, unaware that his life was about to change forever. His rough hands moved with practiced precision, the rhythmic scrape of the whetstone on steel a familiar comfort. Terran had once been a hero. Years ago, he had led men into battle, fought against the dark forces of the world, and emerged victorious time and time again. But those days were long past. Now, he lived a simple life, tending to his farm and raising his daughter. The days of glory and war seemed like another lifetime, but fate had a way of finding even those who sought to escape it. Terran heard the gallop of hooves before he saw the rider, a messenger, bearing news that could not wait. The man rode up to the cottage and dismounted, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Terran," he called out, breathless. "There's news from the capital." "The wizard." "Kale. He's found the Dragon Soul ruins." The word struck Terran like a blow. He stood slowly, his muscles tensing. "Are you certain?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The messenger nodded. "He's gone mad with power. The King's Council has sent word across the land, calling on anyone with the courage to stop him. They say he means to use the Dragon Soul to take control of the kingdoms." Terran closed his eyes, memories of battle and loss flooding his mind. He had sworn never to fight again, but this was something different. The Dragon Soul, in the hands of someone like Kale, was a threat too great to ignore. "Gather your things," Terran said quietly. "I'll leave at first light." By the time Terran reached the city of Illithir, a group had already begun to form. Heroes, adventurers, and those with little to lose gathered in the main square, exchanging stories and plans on how to stop Kale before it was too late. Among them were three who would soon become central to the fight. Lyra, a scholar of ancient magic, had come from the far reaches of the West. She was known for her vast knowledge of arcane texts, particularly those that detailed the history of the dragon race. Tall and thin, with sharp features and even sharper wit, Lyra moved through the crowd with an air of confidence. She had spent years studying the dragons, not just for their power, but for their role in shaping the balance of the world. She knew that their downfall had been a result of their own hubris, and that the Dragon Soul Kale sought would bring not salvation, but destruction. Erin, a healer from a small coastal village, stood quietly by the fountain, watching the growing crowd with cautious eyes. She had no desire to fight. Her calling was to heal, to help, to bring peace to those in pain. But the world had a way of drawing people into conflicts they could not avoid. With her gentle demeanor and soft voice, she often went unnoticed in a crowd, but those who knew her spoke of her strength. For Erin, the dragon soul represented not just a threat to the world, but a threat to life itself. If Chaol succeeded, there would be no more healing, no more peace, only endless war. And then there was Finn, a thief and a rogue, with a heart as elusive as his loyalties. He had no stake in the fight against Chaol, no noble cause to protect. But the rumors of the treasure hidden within the ruins had caught his attention. Gold, jewels, and ancient artifacts. Finn didn't care about the dragon soul or its power, only the wealth it could bring him. If he could find a way to profit from this adventure, so be it. And if that meant tagging along with a group of heroes, then so be it. When Taran arrived, sword at his side, he approached the group with little fanfare. His presence was commanding, his reputation well known. He was the warrior who had defeated the dark sorcerer years ago, and though time had weathered his body, his strength was undeniable. Lyra was the first to greet him. "You must be Taran," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "The hero of the Battle of Frostfall." Taran grimaced at the title. "I don't fight for glory anymore," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But this is different." Lyra nodded. "It is. Chaol's power grows stronger every day. If we don't stop him soon, the dragon soul will be his, and with it, he'll have control over all magic. No one will be safe." Erin stepped forward, her eyes filled with concern. "There must be another way," she said. "Violence, it only leads to more violence." Taran shook his head. "We've no choice, healer. Sometimes, the only way to stop evil is to meet it head-on." Finn leaned against a pillar, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, if we're all going to die anyway, might as well make it interesting, right? I've always wanted to see the inside of the Dragon Soul ruins." The group was formed, and though their motivations were varied, they all knew that the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Together, they set off towards the ancient ruins, unaware of the trials that awaited them. Chaol stood before the dragon soul, its ethereal form glowing faintly within the chamber. The air was thick with ancient magic, a power so strong it seemed to pulse through the stone walls. The dragon soul, encased in a shimmering sphere of energy, was everything Chaol had dreamed of. He could feel its pull, hear its voice whispering promises of untold power. At last, Chaol whispered, reaching out a hand towards the sphere. "The world will be mine." The dragon soul's voice was soft at first, a low murmur in the back of his mind. But as Chaol drew closer, its voice grew stronger, filling his thoughts with visions of conquest. Empires falling, kingdoms bowing before him, the world at his feet. This was his destiny. With the power of the dragon soul, he would become a god, but the dragon soul had its own desires. It had been trapped for centuries, bound by the magic of the ancient dragons. And now, with Chaol's help, it would be free once more. But freedom came at a cost. Chaol began the ritual, chanting the incantations he had learned from the ancient texts. The chamber trembled as the dragon soul's power surged, filling the air with crackling energy. But as Chaol's voice rose, something unexpected happened. The dragon soul, sensing his ambition, began to twist and corrupt his magic. Where Chaol had sought control, the soul sought domination. Meanwhile, the heroes made their way through the labyrinthine ruins, their path fraught with danger. Traps set by the ancient dragons tested their resolve, magical barriers blocked their way, and illusions played on their deepest fears. Each step forward was a battle of both mind and body. Terran led the way, his sword cutting through the illusions with brutal efficiency. But the deeper they went, the more the ruins tested them. Lyra, with her vast knowledge of ancient magic, deciphered the symbols and runes that lined the walls, guiding them through the maze. Erin's healing magic kept them alive when the traps grew too dangerous, and Finn's nimble fingers disarmed the more mechanical obstacles, but the greatest test came when they reached the inner sanctum. The dragon soul, aware of their presence, reached out to each of them, offering them their heart's deepest desires. Terran was shown a vision of his family, alive and well, living in peace. Lyra was tempted with ultimate knowledge, the secrets of the universe laid bare before her. Erin saw a world without war, where healing and peace reigned supreme. And Finn saw wealth beyond his wildest dreams. Each of them was tempted to abandon their mission, to give in to the dragon soul's promises. But in the end, it was their bond, their trust in each other, that broke the illusion. Together, they overcame the dragon soul's temptation, their resolve stronger than ever. As they entered the final chamber, they found Kale standing before the dragon soul, his body twisted and corrupted by its power. The once ambitious wizard was now a mere puppet, his mind consumed by the soul's influence. The chamber shook as the ritual reached its climax, the dragon soul's power spilling into the world, threatening to tear the very fabric of reality apart. "You're too late!" Kale screamed, his voice warped by the soul's power. "With this power, I will remake the world." Terran stepped forward, sword drawn. "You're wrong, Kale. The dragon soul will consume you. It will consume everything." Lyra, understanding the true nature of the dragon soul's corruption, knew that they couldn't fight Kale with brute force. Instead, she devised a plan. Using the knowledge she had gathered from the ancient texts, she began a counter-ritual, one that would seal the dragon soul away forever, but time was running out. As the chamber crumbled around them, the heroes fought to buy Lyra the time she needed to complete the ritual. Terran battled Kale, their swords clashing in a flurry of sparks. Erin used her magic to shield them from the collapsing ceiling, while Finn darted around the room, disarming the traps that threatened to destroy them all. Kale, now fully consumed by the dragon soul's power, unleashed a wave of dark magic, sending Terran crashing to the ground. But just as Kale moved to deliver the final blow, Lyra completed the ritual. A blinding light filled the chamber as the dragon soul was sealed away, its power locked once more within the ancient sphere. Kale, his body and mind broken by the soul's influence, collapsed to the floor. The heroes stood in the silence that followed, the weight of what they had accomplished settling over them. They had stopped Kale, saved the world from the dragon soul's corruption. But the cost had been great. Kale was gone, consumed by his own ambition. As they left the ruins, the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light over the land. The world, though scarred by the events that had transpired, was safe once more. The heroes, now bonded by their shared experience, knew that their journey was far from over. The walk back from the ruins was slow, the weight of what had transpired still heavy on their minds. The jagged peaks and broken paths that had once seemed so foreboding now felt smaller, almost insignificant, in the aftermath of facing the raw power of the dragon soul. The landscape, still marked by the chaos of their battle, stretched on before them, quiet and still. Terran wiped a streak of dried blood from his forehead, his body aching from the battle with Kale. He glanced back at the ruins, the ancient structures barely visible now, hidden in the distance. No one spoke. There was an unspoken agreement between them. Words wouldn't do justice to what they had endured. Each of them had been changed, in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. Terran felt the familiar weight of his sword on his back, but now it carried more than just the burden of battle. It carried the memory of every decision, every sacrifice they'd made. His hand tightened around the strap of his pack, and he continued forward, letting the silence of the mountains fill the space where words once lived. Lyra walked beside him, her brow furrowed in deep thought. She had spent years studying the dragons, their history, their magic. Now, after witnessing the true power of the dragon soul firsthand, she wasn't sure what to make of it all. The ancient texts had warned of its dangers, but there was something more, something that wasn't written down in the scrolls she had pored over for so long. The corruption, the temptation, had been far more insidious than she had anticipated. "I didn't think it would feel like that," Lyra finally muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Terran slowed his pace but didn't respond. He understood what she meant. The dragon soul had reached into their minds, offered them everything they desired most, and nearly shattered their resolve. It had been more than just a test of strength, it had been a test of their very souls. Erin walked behind them, her footsteps light, but her expression troubled. Her healing magic had saved them more than once, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been enough. Kale had fallen, not because they had saved him, but because they had failed to pull him back from the brink. She had wanted to help him, to show him that power wasn't the answer, but by the time they reached him, it had been too late. The corruption of the dragon soul had consumed him, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow for the man he had once been. "He was beyond saving," Erin whispered, as if speaking aloud would make it more real. "Even if we had reached him sooner, he was already lost." Finn, who had been walking a few paces ahead, slowed his steps until he was level with the others. He hadn't spoken much since the battle, and the usual cocky smirk was absent from his face. For a man who had spent his life chasing fortune and avoiding responsibility, the events at the ruins had shaken him more than he cared to admit. "Couldn't have saved him," Finn muttered, his voice gruff. "Some people just lose their way. He made his choice." The group continued walking, their path winding through the foothills that led back to the nearest village. The landscape had shifted slightly since they had first set out, the once foreboding mountains now feeling oddly serene. The ruins were behind them, the dragon soul sealed away once more, but the memory of its power lingered in the air like a shadow. By the time they reached the village, dusk had begun to settle over the land. The small, humble buildings came into view, their windows glowing with the soft light of evening hearths. The sounds of everyday life, laughter, the clinking of pots, the occasional bark of a dog, drifted toward them, a stark contrast to the battle they had fought only days before. The villagers were unaware of the danger that had nearly destroyed their world. For them, life went on as it always had, unburdened by the knowledge of what had been lurking in the mountains. As the heroes approached, they were greeted with curious glances, though no one asked any questions. They were travelers, like many before them, passing through on their way to some unknown destination. Terran led the way to the inn, his steps slow and deliberate. The weight of exhaustion hung heavy on his shoulders, though it was more than just physical. He pushed open the wooden door, and the warm, smoky air of the inn enveloped them. The fire crackled in the hearth, and the low murmur of conversation filled the room. It was a place of comfort, a stark contrast to the ruins they had left behind. The innkeeper, a stout man with a weathered face, glanced up as they entered. He offered them a nod, recognizing the weariness in their faces. "Rooms are ready for you upstairs," he said, gesturing toward the narrow staircase at the back of the room. Terran thanked him with a nod, and the group made their way up the creaky stairs to their rooms. The narrow hallway was dimly lit by a single lantern, and the wooden floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they walked. They separated in silence, each heading to their own room without so much as a word. There was nothing left to say. Terran entered his room and closed the door behind him, leaning his sword against the wall before collapsing onto the small bed. His muscles ached, and his mind was still racing with the events of the past few days. But now, in the quiet of the room, the full weight of it all began to settle over him. He stared at the ceiling, the flickering light of the lantern casting long shadows across the walls. He thought of Kale, of the dragon soul, of the power they had fought to keep sealed away. They had won, but at what cost? The world had been saved from the dragon's corruption, but the price had been Kale's life, and perhaps, a part of their own souls. In the next room, Lyra sat at the small wooden desk, poring over her notes. The firelight flickered in the corner, casting her shadow against the wall. Her mind raced with thoughts of the ancient texts, the magic, and the secrets they had uncovered. The power of the dragon's soul was unlike anything she had ever encountered, and it would take her a lifetime to fully understand it, but for now, she was content to sit in silence, letting the events of the past few days wash over her. They had succeeded, but the journey had changed her. She had come seeking knowledge, and what she had found was far more complex than she had ever imagined. Across the hall, Erin lay on her bed, her thoughts swirling with memories of the battle. She had always believed in peace, in healing, in helping others. But sometimes, it seemed, peace was not enough. Kale had been beyond saving, consumed by his own ambition and the power of the dragon soul. She had wanted to heal him, to show him that there was another way, but in the end, he had made his choice. Finn, in his own room, sat by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The stars were beginning to appear, their faint light twinkling against the inky blackness. He had never cared much for heroics, but something about this journey had changed him. For the first time in his life, he had been part of something bigger than himself, something that mattered. He wasn't sure what to make of it all. The treasure had been real enough, but the power it held, that was something else entirely. He had seen what it had done to Kale, and for the first time, he understood that some things were worth more than gold. Some things couldn't be stolen or bargained for. They had to be earned. As the night deepened, the heroes drifted into an uneasy sleep, each haunted by their own memories of the battle. The dragon's soul was sealed away, but its influence lingered, a reminder of the power that still existed in the world, and the dangers that came with it. The next morning, the sun rose over the village, casting its golden light over the rooftops. Birds chirped in the trees, and the sounds of daily life began to stir once more. The heroes gathered in the inn's common room, their faces tired but resolute. Terran was the first to speak. "We did what we had to do," he said, his voice steady. "The dragon's soul is sealed away. But we can't forget what we've seen." Lyra nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "There's more out there. More magic, more dangers. We've only scratched the surface." Erin, her expression soft but determined, added, "We have to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands again. We owe that much to the world." Finn, leaning back in his chair, gave a half smile. "Looks like we've got ourselves a new job, then." They shared a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. The journey wasn't over. There would always be new threats, new challenges, and new adventures. But for now, they had earned a moment of peace. As they stepped out into the morning light, the world stretched out before them, vast, beautiful, and filled with both wonder and danger. The dragon's soul was sealed, but their story was far from over.